Alfred Cohen is a painter who shows us how profoundly coloured we are by the covenants we make or break, or how profoundly coloured we are by the covenants we make precisely because we sense or already know something of those we've been compelled to break. I see it in his portraits of two chairs tilted towards each other, as in Katya's Terrace of 1991. Because it's hard for me to see two chairs absent of their sitters, and if you look at Katya's Terrace, you can see that the two chairs are very much turned in the direction of each other, rather than out towards the obviously appealing view beyond, without intuiting a covenant, be it a friendship covenant or a marriage covenant, hovering over them, as indeed appears, more or less literally, above the chairs in Cohen's important painting of an interior with important painting of 1987, hung up in another such domestic interior. To view the two chairs is to sense a scene of relaxed companionability, which presumably often included the company of the painter making himself at home in the homes of friends he was accustomed to visiting. But while sharing certain obvious characteristics, Katya's Terrace and Interior with Important Painting are quite different. Interior with Important Painting may look like the faithfully rendered home of a happy couple, but it's a purely imaginary interior, which therefore functions rather suggestively as an intimate image of the interior life. As such, it tells us something extremely insightful, I think, about the way in which the interior life influences and arranges the exterior life. For as we can see, everything within the frame reflects the colours, the lines, the shapes, angles and proportions of the Chagall painting, as if what we're privy to is a picture that does not depict the interior life as it's frequently imagined, as inherently jumbled, fragmentary, disorganised and so on. Rather, without denying the validity of that view, Interior with Important Painting is significant for the way in which it shows us something else about the interior life. That is, it pictures the way in which the interior life manages its chaotic impulses by insisting on a certain organisation, through seeking out such symmetries, resonances and references as can reliably repeat its interests and demands in the world beyond the interior. This it achieves in the first place by decorating a world that confirms continually its own temperament and sensibility, so that we can then glean from Interior with Important Painting how decor, far from being merely a surface matter, deserves to be taken seriously as indeed a matter of significant psychosocial importance. The expansion of what that might mean politically can be further glimpsed if we move outwards towards Cohen's covenantal vision of exteriors, as encountered most directly by the many flags that adorn his landscapes, and particularly his seascapes, as in Folkestone of 1974 to 75. His paintings mostly feature European flags, but it takes an American probably to spot once again their insistence and their resonance, and to recognise in the flag the insignia of a quasi-religious covenant between nation and citizen. And I can't help feeling too that an American best appreciates how the colours of a flag can colour the world of that flag. For Alfred Cohen evidently grasped how to use colour in a way that's unabashed and free of fear, as if there's nothing so bright or bold or lurid that it can't be blended harmoniously into the natural world, to the point where nature and culture, life and art seem too much a part of each other to tell them apart from each other, which processes of naturalization should perhaps also flag up for any aspiring political actor the folly of attempting to restructure the world by means of reason or argument alone. The colours of the flags meld into the landscapes and get reflected by the landscapes, and the flags, like those colours, move through the landscapes fluidly, mostly on boats, which I prefer to see as arcs, like Noah's Ark, including in a picture I especially love, Rainbow of Tréport of 1972, which shows us the arc of a rainbow blazing its colours brightly in a dark sky above a small, valiant, flag-bearing boat. The rainbow, of course, was the original covenant God made with humanity after the flood, when trust between Creator and created was all but broken, and so God promised Noah the rainbow should appear as a sign of his vow never to flood the world again. So it was God who first made faith such a dicey business by establishing that we're only really compelled to formalize commitments of faith, or covenants, at the moment when our capacity for trust has been severely tested to the point of breaking. We make promises, that's to say, because we know from experience that we may well fail to honour them. The Rainbow of Treport comes from a slightly later period of work than his earlier portrait of Noah of 1964. But we can see how his Noah, iconic and enigmatic, has been coloured by the rainbow covenant he made, which isn't to deny that his Noah is also, evidently, an ambivalent presence who betrays something of the doubleness of man and of the covenants men make. For here is a man who may have been saved and who may have saved, and yet whose appearance, for all the colour it radiates, strikes one as that of a man whose trust has indeed been broken, as if after what he's seen and survived, his face had turned into a kind of death mask, reminiscent in a way of the grotesque masked figures from Cohen's Commedia dell'arte and Punch and Judy series. Indeed, given what reportedly unfolded after the flood, the parallel could hardly be more apposite. For can't we also see in this portrait something of the bloodied eyes of the Noah whose post-diluvian life was very much one of bathos, pathos, and obscenity, of drunken stupor and sexual humiliation? A painterly reminder, in other words, that those who save us cannot always save themselves.